I've waffled on my opinion of Burncycle so many times by now that I'm still going to give a rating and final thoughts and all of that stuff, but you should probably take my opinion with a grain of salt. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Burncycle from Chip3 Games, their newest big game that's following in the lines of Hoplomachus, of Too Many Bones, of Cloudspire, a few other games that don't really feel like Chip3 games but technically are, and now Burncycle. Burncycle, and I'm not going to be doing a full rules everything here, there's a lot of technical details going on. I'll focus on the higher level overviews, we'll dive into it, then I'll do opinions, all the usual review stuff, timestamps to any relevant section down below. So, what is Burncycle? At a high level, Burncycle represents a stealth-based game where you're going to have specific objectives from giant piles full of objectives going through not this whole stack. If we separate these out over here, if we separate these out, we have this many objectives, okay? This is how many objectives we have to go through, just a whole lot. Now, granted, this is the base game plus the first expansion, which adds a corporation, so you have one extra corporation, but a whole lot of possible objectives to go through. Each of those objectives gives you something else to achieve, to do in this game, but the game's primary mechanism is a semi-stealth-based game in which you're trying to do something while being mindful of the guards who are wandering around, guards who are powerful enough that you generally should not, and I wouldn't say can't, but should be very mindful and wary of when you choose to interact with them and how, especially the captains. You know, occasional guards you can take out, sure, but some of the higher level enemies are just way too much for you to deal with, at least until you level up significantly. This is a game about managing the flow of the game. This is a game about trying to understand how the enemy is going to activate, what you can do, where you can break in, what you can hack into, which doors you can unlock, using the Burncycle, using the action sequence to your advantage in order to accomplish your objectives against forces that are basically stronger than you. Can you be seen by them? Absolutely. Can you catch their awareness? Can you occasionally knock out or stun a guard? All those things, yes. But you have to be very wary and careful with what you choose to do as you go through your actions, as you try to accomplish the mission. Now, objectives are going to come in 1, 2, or 3 floors. Floors representing the layout you're going to have here across the 4 corporations we have, 3 on the base game plus 1 expansion, and each corporation has a 3-floor layout. This is an official building that you're going to be working with. Depending on what mission you're doing, the corporation itself does not change. When you go into when you go to this corporation for one reason or another, it's still the same building. So you're going to dive into the same layouts on each of the 3 floors. That's going to be 12 different map layouts with a ton of different objectives and situations around them, with rules as far as how the setup changes, how your goals change, all the things that are changing in the experience. That's what you're trying to do. And the what is drastically different depending on the objective you're going for. So the what could be any number of different things, I wouldn't even say often, any number of different things. Let's stick with that. As far as the general turn sequence or what's happening in this game, well, you're going to go through a little turn sequence play area down here where players are going to take their turns, and players are going to be these individual robots. You represent robots who have been, destroyed by humanity, and you've managed to save yourselves, and humanity's still destroying itself, and you try to rescue humanity, all these other things. Humans bad, robots good in this particular scenario. Terminator would be fine with that. But you have your individual robots, you're going to be using your robots, and you're going to be taking actions following the Burncycle over here. The Burncycle represents the idea of actions that you kind of have to follow, except you don't really have to follow them. You can do whatever you want, but you get bonuses if you follow the Burncycle to a certain degree. So you get sort of certain buffs to your actions as you get better options depending on if you correctly follow the sequence. So you can do what you want, you can be mindful, you can run, you can move, you can open a door, you can strike a guard, you can do any number of different things, but if you plan your turn around the Burncycle, you'll have a slightly more efficient turn as you go through the sequence. You're additionally going to be using dice as your primary action economy. You're going to be choosing to roll dice to power certain actions. Not all actions require dice, but many of them do, and many of them require better rolls in order to do the action efficiently. Breaking a lock, you could alternatively have some options as far as not using your dice, or you can use your dice to roll for the AP, the action points you'll need to manage to break through. Running around the board will require action points. Striking a guard will require action points. Different things will or won't require action points, although there are often abilities or options as far as if you run out of your action points, because you have kind of 2 different economies going on. You have your Burncycle over here, the individual actions you have, and then you have to spread those dice among those actions, choosing to roll 3 over here and 1 over here, and trying to use those dice to your advantage, spread out across the actions to get what you want as you hack into systems, as you move, as you strike, as you break down doors, as you any number of different things over there. Once you're done with the Burncycle, once you're done taking all your actions, which again involve moving around the board and trying to accomplish your specific goals, you're going to then move to the network step. The network is a separate little miniature game that you're going to be playing over there, where you're going to be managing a few other things, including your strength on the network, including lowering the threat, which is one of the ways you'll lose the game. If this threat ever creeps up to the end, you will fail your mission, so you need to be mindful of keeping that threat in check, and then also giving you additional power, which is your in-game resource for powering up across the game. So you do all the stuff here, you do a little mini game over here where you manage all those different little things, and then the other players do so as well, however many robots you have in the game, and you do also have this command chip over here, this command interface, command unit or something, command module. You have a command module over here that is always present in the game that represents this other bot that you can spend your action points towards that bot as well as yourself to help control it, also giving you an ability at the same time. And then when you're done with all that, when you're done taking your actions with each bot, you'll then go ahead and take the enemy turn. The corporation will take their turn, in which the various enemies will wander around the board trying to track you down, following certain pre-scripted rules that will adjust or change based on where you've been last located, whether you're currently in their awareness, whether they have their own patrol routes that they're going on. So you have to be kind of aware of the enemy's AI, how they'll react to your movements, and how they'll react regardless of what you do in the game, and follow through that sequence. And then the enemy goes ahead and takes their own turn on the network. They get to activate their pings when they try to chase you down and hunt you out of the network. So you're playing a minigame here to stay alive, but also a minigame that ties into what you're doing over here. That's basically what's happening in any single given round. You'll lose the game if your command module goes to 0 power, you'll lose the game if you get to 0 threat, or the maximum threat, and you'll win the game if you accomplish your specific objectives along the way. Or you go to the next floor, in which case you set up the next map for that specific floor that you're going for, and continue the escalation, continue it is whatever it is you're trying to do in Burncycle. That's mostly how you play. Skipping a million details because there's a lot of things going on here. There's 40 pages of learn to play, plus another like 35, 40 pages of a reference book. There's a lot of information to go through. I'm covering the higher level overview. Diving into it with somebody is not that hard, which let's go ahead and dive into the review. Let's start with the review over here with ease of play. Diving into Burncycle with somebody else is not necessarily that hard. If you have someone holding your hand, if you have someone guiding you, they can know all the stuff that needs to be known while giving you the information you need to drive forward. You'll still need to be taught the game, but it's not the hardest experience. If you're diving into Burncycle yourself, if you're the person who's trying to run the game for other people, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of references. The rulebook is structured as a bit of a kind of walkthrough of let's follow along as we do this thing that's pre-scripted, so you can both learn and also see examples as we go, which is great for learning, not as good for referencing, but then again they have a separate reference book, so they have both those options there. That also means trying to find information though, where do you go? Do you jump into the rules reference because it's referenceable over there, or do you dive into the learn to play, which is where you learn to play, so that's where you kind of know where that thing is. There's a lot going on in the rules. This is very much following chip theory games' modus operandi of having very solid games, and we'll get to my opinion of the game soon enough, but along with that, a lot of overhead to dive into their games. Too Many Bones was a game that I love Too Many Bones, but it took me a lot to get into. Cloudspire is a game I still have not managed to properly sit down and table, despite trying multiple times, and Burncycle is a game that I have sat down and tabled multiple times, but I have yet to play the game without having to reference the rulebook. Every single time I play this game, I've had to reference some situation that came up that I was like, how does that work again? What about this? What if you combine the lockpick with that? There's all these different other things that always intertwine with the game elements going on here that I've yet to play the game without referencing the rules, or alternatively playing it wrong. I've probably played it wrong every single time I've played it as well. As far as player count, this is a 1 to 4 player game. I have played this at 1, 2, and 3 players. Playing it solo so far is by far my favorite way to play the game. By far my favorite way to play the game. Playing it 3 players is something I would reluctantly be willing to do again for the sake of spending time on something that I enjoy with other people. That's fine. Playing it 2 players, I'm totally fine with. 2 players brings a degree of teamwork, of interactivity, of working together to solve the puzzle. But playing it solo is by far my favorite way to currently engage with Burncycle, to the point that I'll be giving it a different rating for different player counts at the end of this. I'm going to be going ahead being very mindful of my rating of this game when we get to final thoughts and rating. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there's a lot to like here. Burncycle does a lot of the things that I like in games, and I'm just going to rattle through a list here. I'm going to rattle through a list of all the things that are fun here, because there's a ton of stuff that are fun here. The individual robots you play as are fun. Every single robot gives you their own default ability to start with, and then abilities you can unlock, and they all feel powerful and broken in different ways. You're like, that robot can do that? Yes, but all the robots can do that, and plus you're on the same team, so no need to be jealous here. They're all amazingly cool. They start off with any number of things. Gyro over here, I love, I'm not sure if it's gyroscope. I'm gonna go ahead with Gyro over here. Gyro is possibly my favorite robot, although that's a very limited approach because I've only played with her once so far. Her or him. I don't know the genders of the robots over here. But we have Gyro, who is absolutely incredible. She's able to move through other robots, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it can be. But then if you update her power walk, her actions cost 2 AP to move no matter how far you want, which means you can just literally glide along the board. You spend 2 AP, you can go all the way down there and spend another 2 AP to turn, another 2 AP to turn, and with 6 AP, you went from here to here. That can happen, and it's insane. And she has these far-reaching arms that she can use to activate command modules or whatever, to activate these interfaces from one spot away, or to unlock doors from one spot away. And if you upgrade that, it can be from 2 spots away. She has an absolute ton of flexibility in terms of how she operates, but so does everyone else. Every single robot in this game is tremendously fun to dive into. Not too many bones level different in terms of what they do, but very different, very unique in terms of the skill set they bring to the table, in terms of the way they will help you win this mission. The robots are a ton of fun. But then, when you flip over the robot, they can become the command module. Every single robot can become your robot or your command module, and Dodger as a command module. All bots start the game with their swap and push abilities at no power cost. That's insane. Every single bot playing can get to their swap and push if she's the command module. And that's going to be true for every single robot over here. Every single one can be a command module, can give you different abilities that will apply to your team, different upgrades that your team has as a whole. And every single one, the combination of the robots and the way they interface as a command module, gives you a ton of interplay in terms of the powers and abilities you'll be starting off the game with, or have to unlock as you spend power to do so. They're a ton of fun, and they break the game. From there, we'll move to the captains, and the captains are not on your side, unfortunately. The captains are the enemies over here. And again, there's a wide variety of captains as far as what they bring to the table. We have just a chunk of captains over here. We have the one over there on the table. We have a whole bunch more over here. Each captain bringing a different challenge as far as what they're going to do, how they're going to hunt you down, how they're going to get in the way, how their chip will activate when it's on the Burncycle, and what it's going to do to be mean to you, because the captains absolutely do want to be mean to you. And that adds to the puzzle, it adds to the variety, it adds to what you're doing. And then the missions. We talked about the operations over here. We talked about the objectives. Just the sheer number of different objectives you have access to, every single one being an incredibly unique puzzle. If you've played Too Many Bones, then you know how different every single card can be. And that's incredibly true if you see how much text there is here. And that text is both a good thing and a bad thing. It means every time you dive into a new operation, you have to understand a new aspect of how the game will operate, and they're not small things. It's not like get here or get here. They're completely different in terms of the thematic way they integrate what you have to do, the sequence of what you have to get done. They are different games. They're different games using the same system, the same board, but giving you entirely different ways to approach the same puzzle. And the variety you have there, combining the missions, combining the captain that will interplay with those missions in different ways, forcing you to consider different things. There's an absolute ton of variety and depth to the experience on the table. And then we have other things over here that are all fun. These are less fun to me, comparatively speaking, to everything else I just talked about, but we do have this entire deck of cards that's fun in different ways. We have our network cards, which represent certain objectives you'll get on the network. They're always fun to get, to earn. You have your terminals. These are a ton of fun. Every time you access a terminal, you draw a card to find out what thing you just hacked into. Can you turn off the security cameras? Can you lock a door? Can you open a door? Can you scout a room? Not scout, survey a room, surveil a room. There's a whole bunch of different ways as far as what you can do over here, spending your action points on various terminal options in order to get some sort of perk, which makes you feel like you're hacking in. You have your lock pads over here, which represent the doors you're trying to break into. Those are my least favorite from all the cards here, but they are impactful. You have your imperatives. Imperatives represent ways to gain power by being restricted. If you restrict yourself in one way or another, specifically one way, whatever this way says, you have the opportunity to gain power throughout the course of the game. You have your equipment over here, equipment that will represent all these dice over here on the side. You have a whole bunch of dice you can utilize for any number of different options as far as what the equipment does and how it helps you win, although very often, if you roll the wrong face on the equipment, it will break, so it's limited in terms of its use. And then you have the mods. Combine the mods, which give you game-breaking abilities as far as how they operate. What's this one over here? Wireless charger. When a keypad shocks your agent, they gain power instead of losing power. So now whenever you break into doors, instead of potentially losing power, you may even gain power if you roll the right side of the die. And these mods give you anything from movement abilities to lockpicking abilities to any number of different abilities in terms of the way they work together with your already incredibly unique robot, together with the command module and the way that impacts your team. And now you have mods as well at the same time. Everything in this game all comes together to give you a unique puzzle every single time you play. There's a lot of fun in terms of trying to find that pathway. You have to do X, you have to do it with Y, you have all these Z options on the side that are affecting that puzzle. There's a lot to like about Burncycle. If you liked Too Many Bones, if you like Cloudspire, I imagine, I haven't actually played Cloudspire, but it seems to have the same general idea. If you like Vindication, if you like any of these styles of games where you have to kind of find a pattern through everything, if you like Unsettled, Burncycle has all those elements. powers and abilities, and a puzzle behind it that drives forward what you do, how you do it, and why you should care about every single thing in front of you. But then there's things I don't like too. And the things I don't like, I'm going to start off with the player count, which I touched upon already. I vastly prefer this game at 1, at playing it solo. I think it's a significantly better experience when you're diving into it solo. I would play it at 2 and reluctantly at 3, which potentially limits where I get this played, but also gives me the opportunity to dive into it solo. But I don't know why it is, because Too Many Bones, for example, and I'm referencing Too Many Bones too many times throughout this review, but it is what it is. Too Many Bones is a game that I'm happy to play solo, but I'm happy to play a 2-player or 3 or whatever. Well, not whatever, 2 or 3. For some reason, something about this game, about Burncycle, I very much prefer it as a solo game. Part of it does have to do with the length as well, because let's touch upon that. This game gives you different operations. You have 1 floor, 2 floors, and 3 floors. To be very clear, I'm reviewing this game having never played a 3-floor operation. I've played 1 floor plenty of times, I've played 2 floors a few times, and 2 floors is already drifting into a 3-hour-long playtime, at least for me, which is possibly why I prefer it solo. Because to me, this game thrives when I'm taking my time, when I'm thinking through the actions, when I'm really just puzzling everything out, where I don't have the pressure of other people waiting on me, when I'm just trying to approach the puzzle. And that does mean that my 1-floor games range anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, my 2-floor games, 2.5 to 3 hours, and I haven't taken the time to play this game at 3 floors yet. I want to, because there are some upgrades, some abilities, more modifications, there's more stuff that happens in a 3-player game, and that 3rd floor is such a ridiculous challenge when it comes to confronting the guards. Everyone's going to be more aggressive, harder to deal with, everything that gets harder and harder as you escalate, and so I want to play at 3 floors. I just need to find the time or place where I'm actually willing to devote 4, maybe 4.5 hours to a 3-floor game. And so that is something, and again, depending on who you are, you may find yourself playing a 3-floor game in 2.5 hours, 3 hours. I don't know. Everyone's going to be different in terms of what they do. But for me, a 2 floors is generally 2.5 to 3 hours, and I haven't tried 3 floors for that reason. Additionally, the network. Now, the network has been my biggest complaint about Burncycle since I first played it way back when it was in prototype form. And my opinion of the network has improved. I like it a lot more now than I did back then, both through the changes they made, as well as through my interactions with it and seeing how it interfaces with the rest of the game. But it still does feel like it's a separate, disparate element of the game that does do what it needs to do. It does interface with the rest of the experience. It's not its own separate thing. You can't take it out. If you take it out, you'd have to proxy in a whole bunch of different elements to make this work the way it's supposed to work. But I like this puzzle, and I find this to be a little bit more tedious. There's decision space, don't get me wrong, but the same puzzle I get out of this is not the same puzzle I get out of there. It is most rewarding when I have these network cards that I'm trying to get, but even that doesn't feel like a puzzle so much as a procedural thing to go through the obvious moves. This always makes me feel like I'm puzzling something out. This makes me feel like I'm going through the actions that are almost predetermined based on what the obvious options are on the table. I'm not saying they're obvious, I'm saying it feels more obvious. It doesn't feel as satisfying as the rest of the experience. I don't think it's the worst, but it also isn't the best. It's grown on me, it's improved, I'm okay with it, but it still feels a little separate and disparate in terms of what it's trying to do. And the rules. The rules we talked about already. The rules are a mess to get through and a mess to continuously reference, and there will be a point where I stop referencing the rules. There will not be a point where I play this game wrong, where I play this game right. But like Too Many Bones before it, I always assume that when I play Too Many Bones, I've missed something somewhere. I always just assume that as a matter of fact, and I'm okay with that. Once I get past the point where I'm referencing rules, that's fine. But again, there's a lot of rules to go through, and there's a lot of interactivities between different elements of the game. There's a lot of questions of how does this work with that? What happens when you have this boss here? And the very pro that you have every single one of these being an entirely separate puzzle also means every single one of these can introduce new questions as, well, I have to do that, but how does that work with that? Because you don't get a handy-dandy rule sheet to go with every single one of these. Sometimes you just have to figure things out and make judgment calls, and that's fine. It's worth the payoff, but it definitely doesn't mean that I like the rules. And then lastly, and this is my least complaint, but it is a thematic disconnect that frustrates me a little bit. The game's called Burncycle because of how tied into the Burncycles are. Thematically speaking, what's happening in this game is the robots have certain actions they have to follow that the humans have programmed. Again, robots good, humans bad. And you have to follow those certain actions, and that's the Burncycle. But the robots have found a way to outmaneuver the Burncycle and to use those actions they have to do to their advantage and still do the things they need to do. To me, that would make sense if you're like, well, you have to move, and then you have to open a door, and I'm programming that out. I have to move, and I have to open a door. But you don't have to do any of that. You can do whatever you want. If you happen to move or open a door at the right time, you get a perk for it. But thematically, what's happening with the Burncycle has nothing to do with mechanically what is happening with the Burncycle. The Burncycle is just the number of actions you have. If you happen to follow the right one at the right time, you get a bonus. There's no form of restriction whatsoever. This is a minor nitpick. Minor. But for a game that calls itself Burncycle and explains what the Burncycle is, I feel the thematic connection is just off. Not the end of the world. Doesn't affect my enjoyment of the game at all. If they didn't call it Burncycle, I wouldn't even be bringing it up at all. In any case, from there, let's move into the things I can see others not liking. And not as much there. Honestly, the what I don't like category has a lot of complaints, but just wait around for the final thoughts. So, in terms of what I can see others not liking, first of all, the difficulty. If your command module dies, or if your threat ever goes down to 0, if your threat escalates to the top point, you lose the game. Now, there's 3 difficulty modes for the game. There's easy, standard, and hard. Easy I haven't bothered playing on at all yet. Standard has been the only way I've played, and standard I would say the game, I haven't felt like I've actually come close enough to losing yet. It always feels like a challenge. Always. Make no mistake. Every single time I've played, I'm always puzzling out how do I win. And that's something I actually like in games. And I like it in games where the game doesn't have to be difficult. I like winning, let's be frank. If I'm playing a cooperative game, I don't mind winning. I do like it when the game feels hard, though. I value feeling hard much more than a game actually being hard, which is another conversation for another day. But a good example of this would be Spirit Island, where sometimes in Spirit Island you always feel like you're being overwhelmed, but you're actually fully in control and will win the game until you start ramping up the difficulty. But it always feels overwhelming. I would say the same thing is going on in Burncycle. Every game I've played in Burncycle has felt like a mental challenge. It has felt like I'm trying to jump through this hoop, make that work, do this together with that, in order to actually puzzle it out and win. And that's amazing. But you might not like the fact that the standard difficulty, I haven't actually come close to losing on it. It just feels difficult, while I think we're actually totally fine. Now, the flip side of that is you could go ahead and raise the difficulty. There's an additional difficulty level in which whenever your awareness is detected, whenever they detect that you're aware at all, they're going to escalate the threat, which means the threat's moving up on the track even more often, and you have to be even more careful and more mindful. I might dabble in that at some point, so there is that option, but I will just say, so far, in standard difficulty, I haven't felt that I would come close to losing yet. Additionally, there's lots of luck in the game. You're going to be rolling dice left, right, and center. And then even just a combination of what cards you draw, what locks you draw, what imperatives you get, what mods you get, what equipment, what network, what terminals, the combination of captain, every single thing in this game is going to have a degree of luck. Even when the pings, exit the network or not, which is a 50% chance, but can be the difference between how well you do on the network and how much of a battle you're playing there versus focusing on there. There is a lot of luck in the game. And then lastly, there is a thematic disconnect to a lot of the play-by-play structure. The nature of the game and the way your robots take turns and then the corporation takes turns has these weird kind of elements where guards are chasing you in a way that feels like they should know where you are. Where you wander into a room and the guards kind of lose sight of you past that first spawn. You're like, I guess you wandered in here. There's no broken walls. There's no hiding spots, but I guess we'll wander out. There's a lot of potential thematic disconnects as you run past people, as you strike guards who aren't fighting back. A lot of options that feel like you're taking turns because you are, even though thematically you shouldn't be. Doesn't bother me at all. Minus that little Burncycle bit, but worth noting in case you are looking for that thematic immersion. I think there are a lot of thematic breaks in terms of what the game is doing. For final thoughts on this one, like I said before, I'm going to rate this on 3 different scales, based on the player count. My journey with Burncycle has been all over the place. I started with this way back when I first played the prototype, doing the Kickstarter, and I thought it had a lot of promise. I thought it was really solid, but also I wasn't sold enough. I liked it. There's a difference between liking a game and loving a game, and when it comes to Chip Theory's games, Chip Theory Games has already given me games I love. There's no need for a game I like. When I finally got the copy, I dove into it more, and my first experiences took it up a notch. My first experiences showed me the promise of the characters, the abilities, the combination of everything, the puzzle I was experiencing, and then the more I played it, it started to go down a little bit as I started to wonder exactly where this game lies for me. And then my absolute low point was after playing a 3-player game where I was like, I did not have as much fun as I would like to have. It was not the worst, but it was certainly not the ideal experience. But from there I started diving back into it solo, and playing it solo put me right back up to where I wanted this game to be for me. Which is why, as far as ratings for this game, I'm going to rate it differently for 3 different player counts. The 3 different player counts I've gone through, because they have given me 3 very different experiences. As far as playing at 3 players, this game's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. There's a lot of solid elements, but the game time and the interaction, the way it works for me, just isn't for me as far as a 3-player experience. At 2 players, this game is a 4 for me. I really enjoy the 2-player interactions and elements, and the way you're working together while still being able to do your own thing and talk, collaborate, solve puzzles, see opportunities that your friend didn't see, working together to dive into the Burncycle. Not really dive into the Burncycle, to use the Burncycle to dive into the corporations. And then as a solo game, it's a 4.5 for me. I really enjoy many elements of this game, a lot of them. It's so much fun to dive into the missions, the captains, the robots, the command modules, modding your robots. Every single thing in this game gives you so much nuance as far as the way things happen. They just give you abilities, they give you ways to break the game, they give you just ways, constrictions, along with powers, and the whole puzzle. I absolutely love it when I'm able to just sit down, to look at the board, and to power through it. The game time and the fact that I can't fully unlock the full experience unless I'm willing to give it 4+ hours, as well as the fact that the network to me still feels like a good but not great part of the game, that's what keeps it from being a 5 for me, which is fine. A 4.5 is an awesome game, I'll take it, but that's where I am with Burncycle. It's an incredible experience, but one that thrives as a solo game for me and has a few things holding it back for me. One thing I want to see, I'd love to see this when they have expansions, is a corporation that's just full of 1-floor missions or full of 2-floor missions. I feel I have a pile full of 3-floor missions that I will never get to experience that 3rd floor, or possibly sometimes, but I don't know. I want to see more content catered towards these shorter form objectives here. More content around that, because I think that's the majority of the way I'm going to engage with Burncycle. I find a single floor game, an hour-and-a-half game of Burncycle, to be tremendously satisfying. 2 floors is excellent, and it's great, and it's better than 1 floor, but also takes twice as long, and if I don't know if it's twice as good. This is a solid game that I'm really enjoying from Chip Theory Games, with caveats, with nuances, with things I don't like, with a lot of things I do like, but it's a really, really solid game. As far as other game recommendations, I mean, I'd be wrong to not talk about Too Many Bones here. Too Many Bones is still my favorite game from Chip Theory Games, and gives me a lot of the same feelings that Burncycle is doing, while being different enough in the implementations that I have room for both in my collection. They're very different in the way they approach abilities, and the way they approach the interaction, the way you're more confrontationally based versus more stealth based. They're very, very different experiences, give me a lot of the same feelings as to the puzzle I like, but while being totally different at the same time. And if you're looking for another game that feels a little more similar in terms of the stealth aspect, where you could take people down, but you want to be mindful of how and why, while also being an overwhelmingly long experience, especially because it's campaign-based, Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite stealth-based games that really gives you a strong similarity in terms of the powers and abilities, in terms of the way you have certain missions, the way you have to be mindful of the AI, how they're going to operate, when you could attack them, when you shouldn't, when you should hide, what you're trying to do. A ton of similarities between the two games on a high level, while feeling very, very different at a low level. Until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one. You could come on camera.
What was that about?
That was Burncycle. I just finished. You guys are right on time. You can say hi to everyone. Hey, Devin!
What'd you do?
I played Burncycle.
You played?
Yeah.
How'd you do?
I gave it 4.5 for solo only.
You still recording?
Yeah.
You increased it to 4.5
for
for
solo.
solo?
You were at 3.5 for a while.
I told them that.
Wow.
Not for a while. I said it's
How much
4.
fun were they, though?
Literally playing with me, you liked it less.
That's not true. That's not true. Playing with you is a 4. Playing with Devin made it a 3.5.
I gotcha. That makes sense.
I said it's a 3.5 for a 3-player game. It's a 4 for a 2-player game, and at solo, I love it. Oh, look at that!
What did they do?
Look at that action.
When taking a move action after each space, I may move. So both of them are very
movement focused,
flexy.
Yes,
I
but
like
do you understand what he does? He can have 3 movement, and move 6 spaces.
When taking a move action after each space he moves, he can take a space left or right.
Ready? You see, he's over here. 1 free movement. 2. Well, that's not great, but I can't. 1. Okay, he's over here. 1 free movement. 2 free movement. 3 free movement.
That's cool.
It's very cool.
That's super cool.
And then what I did is he has high stakes racer. Each time a threat escalation point is reached, you give a bot a power. And so I kept him dancing back and forth the whole game between here, lowering the power on the thingy, then goes up, lowering the power, goes up, and you can reactivate it. So I kept him gaining power every time it went back down and up. And then I strike guards. I struck guards while it was on this, while it was over here, so it hit this again. So I'd gain 2 power and I killed a guard. It's very satisfying. I had a very, very satisfying game. It's not nice. Here. It is here.
Yeah.
Oh, what's interesting is over here, I keep grabbing that, thinking it's a here. You see it right there?
Yeah,
I like the whole game. I like.
Yeah. What is that?
It's a circle.
No, I was mimicking.
Wait.
What is interface?
Jesse's gonna love this. Jesse's gonna love this. Have you seen her ability?
Those cools are so.
Okay. So first of all, look at her first ability, not the unlocked one, the other one.
Gyro may move through other units as
the next one.
Gyro's movement now costs
Gyro.
2 AP, no matter how far she moves, plus an additional 2 AP each time she changes the direction she is moving. You just run forward.
I literally was over here. I spent 6 AP to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, but then flip her over if she's the command module.
All bots start the game with their swap and push abilities at no power cost.
Wow.
They're all cool.
And these are the ones I don't have.